Chapter 1. The wind howled through the Blackwood Forest, carrying shards of ice that stung Clara Monroe's face as she stumbled through the snow. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her thin jacket no match for the blizzard's bite. The flashlight in her hand flickered, its weak beam barely cutting through the swirling white. She wasn't supposed to be here, alone in the wilderness, abandoned by the people she'd trusted. But trust, Clara had learned, was a fragile thing, easily shattered by betrayal. It had started with Jared, her ex, whose charming smile hid a cruel streak she hadn't seen until it was too late. He'd convinced her to leave the city, promising a fresh start in Blackwood, a remote town nestled in the mountains where no one asked questions. Clara, desperate to escape her past, a dead-end job, a string of bad choices, and the ache of her mother's death, had followed him. But tonight, in the woods, Jared's mask had fallen. His friends, drunk and laughing, had egged him on as he tore into her with words sharper than the wind. "You're nothing," he'd sneered, ripping her backpack from her shoulder. "Let's see how tough you are now." They'd driven off, leaving her to the mercy of the storm. Clara's knees buckled, and she sank into the snow, her fingers numb as she clutched the flashlight. The cold was a living thing, seeping into her bones, whispering surrender. She thought of her mother, who'd always said Clara was a fighter. "Keep going, kid," her voice echoed in Clara's mind. But the forest didn't care about grit or promises. It was endless, indifferent, and she was so tired. A low growl rumbled through the darkness, snapping her head up. Her heart lurched, the flashlight slipping from her grip and plunging into the snow. She scrambled to her feet, eyes darting through the trees. The growl came again, closer, deep enough to vibrate in her chest. A shape moved in the shadows, a massive wolf, its fur a blend of midnight and silver, eyes glowing amber in the dim light. Clara froze, her breath catching. She'd heard stories about Blackwood, whispers of things that weren't quite human, but she'd dismissed them as small-town nonsense. Now, staring into those eyes, she wasn't so sure. The wolf stepped forward, its head low, ears pinned back. Clara's pulse roared in her ears, but she didn't run. Something about the creature's gaze held her. Intelligent, almost human, as if it were sizing her up not as prey, but as something else entirely. Before she could process it, a shout broke the silence, followed by the crunch of boots on snow. Headlights pierced the storm, and Jared's truck roared back into view, his friends' laughter spilling out. "There she is," Jared called, his voice slurred. "Thought you'd get away that easy, Clara?" He stepped out, a crowbar in hand, his friends fanning out behind him. Clara's stomach twisted. They hadn't come back to help her. They'd come to finish what they started. The wolf's growl deepened, a sound that promised violence. It moved between Clara and the men, its hackles raised, teeth bared. Jared froze, his bravado faltering. "What the hell is that?" one of his friends muttered, stepping back. The wolf's eyes locked onto Jared, and for a moment, Clara swore she saw recognition in its gaze, as if it knew exactly who he was. "Get out of here," Clara shouted, her voice cracking. She didn't know if she was talking to Jared or the wolf, but neither listened. The wolf lunged, a blur of muscle and fur, and Jared's friends scattered, cursing as they stumbled through the snow. Jared swung the crowbar, but the wolf was faster, dodging with a grace that defied its size. It snapped at his legs, driving him back toward the truck. Clara's heart pounded. She should run, she knew it, but her legs wouldn't move. The wolf wasn't attacking her. It was protecting her. Jared scrambled into the truck, slamming the door as his friends piled in. The engine roared, and the vehicle peeled out, tires spinning in the snow. The wolf stood its ground, watching until the taillights vanished. Then, slowly, it turned to Clara. Its amber eyes met hers, and a strange calm settled over her, like the storm itself had paused to breathe. The wolf took a step closer, and Clara's breath hitched. She should be terrified, but all she felt was a pull, an inexplicable connection to this creature that had saved her. "Don't," she whispered, unsure what she was asking. The wolf tilted its head, then turned and melted into the forest, leaving only tracks in the snow. Clara stood there, trembling, the cold creeping back in. She retrieved her flashlight, its beam flickering weakly, and checked her backpack. Her phone was dead, her wallet nearly empty, but she was alive, because of that wolf. She forced herself to move, following a faint path through the trees. Her mind raced, replaying the wolf's eyes, the way it had looked at her. It wasn't just an animal, she was sure of it. Blackwood was hiding something, and she'd stumbled right into it. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time blurred in the cold. Her legs ached, her vision swimming, but she kept going, driven by the need to survive, to understand what had just happened. Dawn was breaking, gray and weak, when she heard footsteps behind her. Not the heavy crunch of Jared's boots, but something lighter, deliberate. She turned, gripping her flashlight like a weapon, and saw a man emerging from the trees. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a face carved from stone, he moved with a predator's grace. His eyes, amber like the wolf's, locked onto hers, and Clara's breath caught. He stopped a few feet away, his expression unreadable but intense, as if he were seeing her for the first time. "You're hurt," he said, his voice low and rough, like gravel underfoot. He nodded at her torn jacket, where a bruise bloomed beneath. Clara stepped back, her grip tightening on the flashlight. "Who are you?" He hesitated just for a moment before answering. "Lucian, and you're not safe out here alone." Clara's heart raced, her mind screaming that this man, this stranger, was connected to the wolf, to the madness of the night, but his eyes held no threat, only a quiet intensity that made her want to believe him. Against her better judgment, she lowered the flashlight. "Clara," she said, her voice barely audible, "and I don't have anywhere else to go." Lucian's gaze softened, just a fraction, and he gestured toward the path. "Come with me. I've got a place nearby. You can warm up, figure out your next move." Clara didn't move. Trust had burned her before, and she wasn't ready to leap again. But the cold was winning, and something in Lucian's voice, steady, almost protective, made her nod. As she followed him through the forest, the wolf's amber eyes lingered in her mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just collided with something far bigger than herself. Chapter 2. Unlikely Meeting. The forest seemed to close in around Clara Monroe as she followed Lucian through the snow-dusted trees, her boots crunching softly in the early dawn. The storm had eased, leaving a brittle calm that did little to soothe her nerves. Her body ached from the cold and the ordeal with Jared, but it was the weight of Lucian's presence that kept her on edge. He moved with a quiet confidence, navigating the twisting paths of Blackwood Forest as if they were etched into his bones. His broad shoulders cut through the mist, and every so often he glanced back, his amber eyes catching hers with an intensity that made her heart stutter. Clara clutched her backpack tighter, her flashlight now useless in the gray light, and tried to ignore the nagging thought. Those eyes were too much like the wolf's. She didn't know why she was following him. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, not after Jared's betrayal, not after being left to die in the woods. But Lucian's offer of shelter had been steady, almost kind, and the cold was a cruel master. Clara's breath fogged in the air, her fingers numb despite her gloves. She needed warmth, a moment to think, to figure out how to get out of Blackwood and away from the nightmare her life had become. "You're quiet," Lucian said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, carrying over the rustle of pine needles. He didn't turn, but she felt his attention, sharp and focused, like a predator sensing her every move. Clara's jaw tightened. "Not much to say when you're hiking through a frozen forest with a stranger." Her tone was sharper than she meant, but she didn't apologize. She wasn't here to make friends. Lucien's lips twitched, a hint of amusement that didn't reach his eyes. "Fair enough." He slowed, pointing to a faint trail veering off the main path. "It's not far now. Cabin's just through there." Clara hesitated, scanning the dense trees. The path was narrow, barely visible, and the forest seemed to swallow it whole. "You live out here alone?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "No neighbors, no town nearby?" "Blackwood's not exactly a social hub," he said, his tone dry. "I like the quiet." He glanced at her, his gaze lingering on the tear in her jacket, The bruise she knew was darkening beneath. "You don't strike me as someone who came here for the scenery." Clara's stomach twisted. He was fishing and she wasn't ready to spill her story. "I didn't come here by choice," she said curtly. "Let's leave it at that." He nodded, accepting her deflection without pushing. It was a small mercy, but it only deepened her unease. Most people would pry, demand answers. Lucien's restraint felt calculated, like he already knew more than he let on. She studied him as they walked, noting the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the faint scar slicing through one eyebrow, the way his hands, calloused and strong, flexed at his sides. There was a wildness to him, a barely contained energy that made her think of the wolf again. The cabin came into view, a sturdy log structure tucked against a rocky outcrop, its chimney trailing a thin wisp of smoke. It was small but solid, with frost-rimmed windows glowing faintly in the dawn. Clara's body yearned for the promise of warmth, but her mind screamed caution. She stopped a few feet from the door, her breath catching as Lucien turned to face her. "You coming in?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm, like he knew she was teetering on the edge of bolting. Clara's grip tightened on her backpack strap. "Why are you helping me?" "You don't know me. For all you know, I'm trouble." Lucien's eyes softened, just for a moment, and Clara caught a glimpse of something raw. Pain, maybe, or a memory he didn't want to share. "Maybe I know what it's like to be out here with nowhere to go," he said quietly. "Or maybe I just don't like seeing someone freeze." The words hit harder than she expected, stirring a pang in her chest. She thought of her mother, of the nights they'd spent huddled in a car when rent money ran dry. Clara had been running from that kind of desperation her whole life, only to end up here, in the middle of nowhere, relying on a stranger. She swallowed, pushing the memory down. "Fine," she said, "but I'm not staying long." Lucien nodded and pushed open the door, letting a wave of warmth spill out. The cabin was sparse but inviting. A stone fireplace, a worn couch, a wooden table cluttered with maps and books. Clara stepped inside, the heat seeping into her bones, and sank into a chair by the fire. Lucien moved to a cabinet, pulling out a first aid kit. "Let me see that bruise," he said, nodding at her arm. Clara stiffened, her hand instinctively covering the tear in her jacket. "It's nothing. It's not nothing," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He knelt in front of her, his movements careful, almost reverent as he opened the kit. Clara hesitated, then slid her jacket off, wincing as the motion tugged at the bruise. Lucien's eyes darkened at the sight of the purpling mark, but he didn't comment. He cleaned the area with an antiseptic wipe, his touch gentle yet precise, and Clara found herself holding her breath. His hands were warm, steady, and for reasons she couldn't name, her skin tingled where he touched her. "Thanks," she muttered when he finished, pulling her arm back quickly. She avoided his gaze, focusing on the fire instead. The flames danced, casting shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Lucien stood, his shadow falling over her. "You need food. I've got stew on the stove." He moved to the small kitchen area, his back to her, and Clara took the chance to study him again. His flannel shirt stretched across his shoulders, and she noticed a faint tattoo on his forearm, a crescent moon, partially hidden by his sleeve. It looked old, the ink faded but deliberate, like a mark of something significant. "Who are you, really?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. "You're not just some guy living in the woods. Nobody lives like this without a reason." Lucien paused, his hand on a ladle, and for a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he turned, his amber eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart skip. "I'm just someone who knows these woods," he said, but the words felt like a half-truth. A door cracked open but not wide enough to see through. Clara leaned forward, her voice low. "That wolf last night, it wasn't normal. It looked at me like it knew me. And you..." She hesitated, the accusation heavy on her tongue. "Your eyes. They're the same." Lucien's jaw tightened, and for a split second, something wild flashed in his gaze, something that confirmed every suspicion clawing at her mind. But then it was gone, replaced by a careful neutrality. "You've had a rough night, Clara," he said, turning back to the stove. The mind plays tricks when you're scared. She wanted to push, to demand answers, but the weight of exhaustion held her back. Instead, she watched him ladle stew into a bowl, the steam rising in the firelight. He set it in front of her, his fingers brushing the table's edge, and Clara felt that strange pull again, like a thread tying her to him. She didn't trust it, but she couldn't ignore it either. As she ate, the forest outside seemed to grow quieter, too quiet, and Clara's gaze drifted to the window. Something was out there, watching, waiting, and Lucian, with his secrets and his amber eyes, was part of it. She just didn't know how deep the mystery ran, or how much it would cost her to find out. Chapter 3. Suspicion and Curiosity. The fire in Lucian's cabin crackled, casting flickering shadows across the rough-hewn walls. Clara sat rigid in the chair, her bandaged hand resting on her lap, the sting of the antiseptic fading, but not the unease curling in her chest. Lucian stood by the window, his back to her, gazing out at the darkening forest. The silence between them was heavy, charged with unspoken questions. Clara's mind churned, replaying the events of the past 24 hours. The wolf, Jared's cruelty, and now this stranger who seemed to know too much about her without saying a word. She shifted, the creak of the chair breaking the quiet. Lucian turned, his amber eyes catching the firelight, and for a moment, Clara swore they glinted with something inhuman. She swallowed, her throat dry. "You didn't answer my question," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Who are you, really?" Lucian's expression remained unreadable, but his shoulders tensed, a subtle shift that betrayed his calm facade. "I told you? I'm Lucian. I live out here. Keep to myself." He moved to the table, picking up a kettle as if to busy himself. "You want tea? It's chamomile. Calms the nerves." Clara's eyes narrowed. He was dodging her, and she wasn't in the mood for games. "You're not just some hermit in the woods. No one lives like this." She gestured at the maps and books scattered across the table, the worn but well-maintained cabin, and just happens to find a stranger the morning after. She trailed off, unsure how to describe the wolf without sounding unhinged. After what? Lucian's voice was low, probing, as he set the kettle on a small stove. He didn't look at her, but she felt his attention, sharp and focused, like a predator listening for the faintest rustle. Clara hesitated. Telling him about the wolf felt like exposing a wound, but the words spilled out anyway. "Last night I was attacked by people I thought I could trust. They left me out there to freeze. But someone stopped them. A wolf." Her voice wavered and she hated it. It wasn't normal. It looked at me like it knew me. Lucian's hand paused on the kettle, his knuckles whitening for a fraction of a second. When he turned, his face was a mask of neutrality. "Wolves are rare in these parts," he said carefully. "Maybe you saw a dog. Adrenaline can play tricks." "It wasn't a dog," Clara snapped, frustration bubbling up. "It was huge, with eyes like—" She stopped, staring at him. "Like yours?" she wanted to say. But the thought felt too wild, too impossible. Instead, she said, "You don't seem surprised." Lucian poured hot water into 2 mugs, the steam curling between them. "Blackwood's full of stories. Wolves, spirits, curses. People see what they want to see." He slid a mug toward her, his fingers brushing the table's edge. "Drink. You're still shivering." Clara took the mug, the warmth seeping into her palms, but she didn't drink. She watched him instead, noting the way he avoided her gaze, the way his movements were too precise, too controlled. "You're not telling me something," she said. "I'm not stupid, Lucian. You show up out of nowhere, you know these woods like you were born in them, and you're acting like my story about a wolf is just another Tuesday." He leaned against the table, crossing his arms. The crescent moon tattoo on his forearm peeked out again, and Clara's eyes lingered on it. "You're not wrong," he said after a long pause. "There's more to Blackwood than most people know, but you don't strike me as someone who believes in ghost stories." "Then tell me what I should believe," she challenged, leaning forward. Her heart pounded, not just from suspicion, but from the intensity of his presence. He was close now, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of pine and earth on him, as if the forest itself clung to his skin. Lucien's eyes softened, just for a moment, and Clara caught a glimpse of something raw. Grief, maybe, or longing. "You should believe that you're safe here," he said quietly. "For now." The words should have comforted her, but they only deepened the mystery. "For now?" she echoed. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved to the fireplace, adding a log with a practiced ease. The flames flared, illuminating the sharp lines of his face. "You said you were running from bad decisions," he said, his back to her. "What kind?" Clara's grip tightened on the mug. She didn't want to talk about Jared, about the way he'd charmed her with promises of a fresh start, only to turn cruel when she wouldn't bend to his will. But Lucian's question wasn't demanding. It was gentle, almost like he understood what it meant to carry scars. "The kind that make you trust the wrong people," she said finally. "The kind that leave you stranded in the middle of nowhere with nothing but a backpack and a bruise." Lucian turned, his gaze locking onto hers. "You don't deserve that," he said, and the sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. "No one does." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to brush it off, to keep her walls up, but something in his tone cracked her defenses. "Yeah, well, I'm used to it," she said, forcing a bitter laugh. "My mom used to say I attract trouble like a magnet. Guess she was right." Lucian's lips quirked, not quite a smile, but close. "Trouble's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it leads you where you're meant to be." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning Clara couldn't quite grasp. She wanted to ask what he meant, but the moment felt fragile, like a thread stretched too tight. Instead, she sipped the tea, the chamomile soothing her frayed nerves. "What about you?" she asked. "What's your trouble?" His expression shuddered, the warmth fading. "Old debts," he said cryptically, turning back to the fire. "The kind you don't outrun." Clara frowned, sensing the wall he'd just thrown up. She was about to press him when a low, eerie howl echoed through the forest, distant but piercing. She froze, the mug trembling in her hands. Lucian's head snapped toward the window, his body going rigid, every muscle coiled like a spring. "What was that?" Clara whispered, her pulse racing. Lucian didn't answer immediately. He moved to the window, his movements silent, predatory. "Stay here," he said, his voice low and commanding. "Don't open the door. Where are you going?" she demanded, standing despite the ache in her legs. He glanced back at her, his eyes blazing with that same unnatural glint. "To make sure the woods stay quiet," he said. Before she could argue, he slipped out the door, leaving her alone in the cabin with the howl still ringing in her ears. Clara's heart hammered as she stared at the closed door. The wolf's cry, Lucian's sudden shift in demeanor, the tattoo, those eyes, it all swirled in her mind, pieces of a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. She crossed to the table, her gaze falling on the maps. One was marked with strange symbols, lines converging on a spot deep in the forest labeled Blood Hollow. Her fingers traced the name, a chill creeping up her spine. Whatever Lucian was hiding, it was tied to this place, to the wolves, to the secrets Blackwood held. And Clara, despite every instinct screaming to run, knew she was already too deep to walk away. Chapter 4. Building Trust. Clara stood by the locked door of Lucian's cabin, her breath shallow as the echo of the distant howl faded into the night. The fire's crackle was the only sound now, but it did little to ease the tension coiling in her chest. Lucian was out there, in the dark, chasing whatever had made that sound. A sound that felt like a warning, a challenge, or something worse. She clutched the edge of the table, her eyes darting to the map marked Blood Hollow. The name pulsed in her mind, as if it held the key to the secrets Lucian was keeping. But the longer she stood alone in the cabin, the more her thoughts turned to him. Not just the mystery, but the man. His quiet intensity, his guarded kindness, the way his touch had been so careful when he bandaged her arm. It stirred something in her, something she wasn't ready to name. She shook her head, trying to focus. She wasn't here to get tangled up in feelings for a stranger. She needed answers, a plan, a way out of Blackwood. But the memory of Lucian's words, "Maybe I know what it's like to be out here with nowhere to go," lingered, tugging at her. He'd seen her pain, recognized it in a way that felt too intimate, too real. Clara sank back into the chair by the fire, her fingers tracing the bandage on her arm. She didn't trust him, not fully, but she couldn't deny the pull she felt, like a thread tying her to him despite every instinct screaming to run. The door creaked open, and Clara's head snapped up. Lucian stepped inside, his coat dusted with snow, his breath visible in the cold air that followed him. His amber eyes scanned the room, landing on her with a mix of relief and something darker, worry maybe, or caution. "It's gone," he said, his voice low as he bolted the door behind him. "Just a lone wolf passing through?" Clara's eyes narrowed. "Just a lone wolf?" she echoed, her tone laced with skepticism. "You bolted out of here like it was something else." Lucian shrugged off his coat, hanging it by the door. "Wolves can be unpredictable," he said, avoiding her gaze as he moved to the fire, warming his hands. "Better to check than take chances." She watched him, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands flexed as if still ready for a fight. "You're not telling me everything," she said, standing to face him. "That howl wasn't random. You knew it meant something." Lucian's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Instead, he turned, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're right," he said quietly. "There's a lot I'm not saying. But it's not because I want to lie to you. It's because some truths are dangerous." The admission hung between them, heavy and electric. Clara's heart pounded, torn between fear and a reckless need to know more. "Dangerous how?" she pressed, stepping closer. "What's out there, Lucian? What are you part of?" He held her gaze, and for a moment she thought he might answer. But then he looked away, his expression shuddering. "You're not ready for that," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Not yet." Clara's frustration flared, but before she could argue, Lucian crossed to the table, picking up the map she'd been studying. His fingers brushed the blood-hollow marker, and his expression darkened. "You shouldn't be looking at this," he said, folding the map with a quick, precise motion. "Some places in Blackwood are better left alone." "Then why do you have it?" She shot back. "If you're just a guy living in the woods, why do you have maps with creepy names and symbols that look like they belong in a horror movie?" Lucian's lips twitched, a faint, almost smile that softened the edges of his intensity. "You don't give up, do you?" he said, setting the map aside. "That's going to get you in trouble." "Already there," Clara said, crossing her arms. "Thanks to you, I'm not freezing to death, but I'm still stuck in the middle of nowhere with a guy who talks in riddles." He chuckled, a low, rough sound that sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Fair point," he gestured to the couch. "Sit. You need rest, and I'm not going anywhere tonight." Clara hesitated, then sat, her body sinking into the worn cushions. Lucian took the chair across from her, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert, like he was still listening to the forest. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable but charged, as if they were both waiting for the other to break it. Clara's gaze drifted to the fire, the flames casting shadows that danced across Lucian's face, highlighting the scar on his eyebrow, the sharp line of his jaw. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice softer now. "Really, you could have left me out there, but you didn't. Why?" Lucien leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped. "I told you," he said. "I know what it's like to be lost. To have no one." His voice was quiet, raw, and Clara caught a glimpse of something beneath his guarded exterior. Grief. Maybe, or a wound that hadn't healed. She swallowed, her own pain rising to meet his. "Who did you lose?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Lucian's eyes flickered, and for a moment, she thought he'd shut her out again. But then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Family. A long time ago, they didn't understand who I was. What I was." He paused, his fingers tightening around each other. "I left before they could make me choose between them and myself." The words hit Clara hard, echoing her own story. Her mother's death, the friends who'd turned their backs, Jared's betrayal. "I get that," she said, her voice thick. "My mom was all I had. When she died, I kept trying to find something to hold on to. Turns out, I picked the wrong people." Lucian's gaze softened, and for the first time, Clara felt like he was seeing her, not just the scared woman he'd found in the woods. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "You survived last night. That's not nothing." Clara's throat tightened, and she looked away, the weight of his words settling over her. She didn't feel strong, not with the bruises on her arm and the fear still gnawing at her. But the way Lucien said it, like he believed it, made her want to believe it too. Another howl pierced the night, closer this time, and Clara's heart lurched. Lucien was on his feet in an instant, his body tense, his eyes blazing with that wild glint she couldn't ignore. "Stay here," he said, his voice sharp. "Don't open the door, no matter what you hear." "Where are you going?" Clara demanded, standing despite the tremor in her legs. "Lucien, what's out there?" He didn't answer, just grabbed his coat and slipped out, the door clicking shut behind him. Clara stared after him, her pulse racing. The howl, the map, Lucien's cryptic words, it all pointed to something bigger, something dangerous. She moved to the window, peering into the darkness, but the forest gave nothing away. Only one thing was certain. Lucien wasn't just a man, and whatever he was hiding was tied to the wolves, to Blood Hollow, to the very heart of Blackwood. And Clara, against every instinct, was determined to find out what it was. Chapter 5. Dangerous Obstacles. The cabin felt too small, too quiet, as Elise Harper stood by the window, her breath fogging the cold glass. The howl that had sent Rhys bolting into the night lingered in her ears, its sharp urgency a stark contrast to the stillness left in his absence. Her fingers gripped the windowsill, her eyes straining to pierce the dark forest beyond, but the trees swallowed everything, sound, light, and answers. The map on the table, marked with Blood Hollow and cryptic symbols, seemed to pulse with unspoken truths, but it was Rhys's parting words, to keep it away, that tightened the knot in her chest. "Keep what away?" And why did his eyes, so like the wolf's, hold a secret that both terrified and drew her in? Elise stepped back, her heart thudding against her ribs. The fire's warmth did little to ease the chill creeping up her spine, a mix of fear and frustration. Rhys's confession about running from a legacy, his haunted admission of loneliness, had cracked something open between them, a fragile connection she hadn't expected. She'd seen her own pain reflected in his, the weight of a past that refused to let go. But his sudden departure, his refusal to explain the howl, only deepened her suspicion. He wasn't just a man hiding in the woods, and the wolf that had saved her wasn't just a wolf. The pieces were there, but the picture they formed was still shrouded in shadow. She paced the small cabin, her boots scuffing the wooden floor. The maps on the table called to her, and she unfolded the one marked Blood Hollow, her fingers tracing the red ink. The symbols, spirals, crescents, and jagged lines, felt like a language she couldn't read, but instinctively understood as important. Dangerous, even. She thought of Rhys's crescent moon tattoo, the way his hand had brushed it as if it carried a weight she couldn't fathom. Whatever he was running from, it was tied to this place, to the wolves, to the howl that had pulled him into the night. The door rattled, and Elise spun, her pulse spiking. It wasn't Rhys. The sound was too harsh, too deliberate. A low growl followed, not like the howl from before, but closer, menacing, vibrating through the walls. She backed away, her eyes darting to the fireplace poker leaning against the hearth. She grabbed it, the cold iron heavy in her hands, and moved toward the door, her breath shallow. "Rhys?" she called, her voice trembling but firm. No answer. The growl came again, accompanied by a heavy thud against the door, as if something large was testing its strength. Elise's heart raced, memories of Caleb's cruelty flashing through her mind. Had he come back? Or was this something else? Something tied to the secrets Rhys was keeping. She gripped the poker tighter, her knuckles white. "Stay back," she shouted, hoping her voice carried more courage than she felt. The door shook again, wood creaking under the force. And then, silence. Elise held her breath, her body tense, waiting for another attack. Instead, she heard a familiar voice, low and urgent. "Elise, it's me. Open the door." "Rhys." Relief flooded her, but suspicion kept her rooted. "How do I know it's you?" she called, her voice sharp. A pause, then. "You asked about my tattoo. I said it was from a past life. Now open the damn door." Elise hesitated, then slid the bolt back, keeping the poker raised as she cracked the door open. Rhys stood there, his coat torn at the shoulder, a streak of blood on his cheek. His amber eyes were wild, but they softened when they met hers. "You okay?" he asked, stepping inside and shutting the door quickly behind him. "What the hell was that?" Elise demanded, lowering the poker but not letting go. Something was trying to get in, Rhys. Something big. He locked the door, his movements swift, and leaned against it, catching his breath. "It's gone," he said, but his voice was tight, his eyes scanning the room as if expecting another threat. "You're safe now. Safe." Elise's voice rose, her frustration boiling over. "Something just tried to break down the door, and you come back looking like you fought a bear. What's out there, Rhys? And don't give me that stray wolf crap again." Rhys's jaw clenched, and he wiped the blood from his cheek with the back of his hand, leaving a smear. "It was a wolf," he said, his tone clipped. "A rogue. They don't usually come this close, but the storm's got them riled up." Elise stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "A rogue? You talk like you know them personally. And that blood on your face, did it do that?" He avoided her gaze, moving to the sink to splash water on his face. "I got caught on a branch," he said, but the lie was thin, and they both knew it. The tear in his coat was too jagged, too deliberate, for a branch. Elise's heart pounded, but it wasn't just fear now. It was the pull she felt toward him, the way his presence filled the room, steady and wild all at once. "Rhys," she said softer now, stepping closer. "I'm not an idiot. I know you're hiding something, but you saved me out there, and I want to trust you. So please, give me something real." He turned, his eyes meeting hers, and for a moment, she saw the weight he carried, grief, duty, something ancient and heavy. "I want to keep you safe, Elise," he said, his voice low, raw. "That's real, but some things, they come with a cost, and I'm not sure you're ready to pay it." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Elise's chest ached, not just from fear but from the connection forming between them, fragile but undeniable. "Try me," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I've lost everything, Rhys. I'm not afraid of a little truth." His lips curved, a bittersweet smile that made her heart skip. "You're braver than you know," he said, his voice soft. "But bravery doesn't always mean rushing in. Sometimes it means waiting." Before she could argue, a sharp crack echoed outside, like a branch snapping under a heavy weight. Rhys's head snapped toward the window, his body tensing, his eyes blazing with that wild glint again. "Stay here," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Lock the door. Don't open it until I'm back." "Rhys, wait," Elise started, but he was already moving, grabbing a flashlight from the table and slipping out into the night. The door clicked shut and she bolted it, her pulse racing. The cabin felt smaller now, the walls closing in as the forest outside grew louder, rustling leaves, distant growls, the sense of something circling closer. Elise's eyes fell to the map again, Blood Hollow staring back at her like a warning. Whatever Rhys was facing out there, it wasn't just a wolf. It was tied to his secrets, to the tattoo, to the legacy he'd fled. And Elise, despite the fear clawing at her, knew she was too deep to turn back. She needed answers, not just for her safety, but because the pull she felt toward Rhys was growing stronger, and it scared her as much as the darkness outside. Chapter 6. The Secret unveiled Elise. Harper pressed her back against the cabin's bolted door, the cold wood grounding her as her heart raced. The forest outside was alive with whispers, rustling leaves, faint growls, and the lingering echo of the crack that had sent Rhys charging into the night. The map on the table, marked with Blood Hollow and cryptic symbols, seemed to mock her with its secrets, but it was Rhys's absence that weighed heaviest. His torn coat, the blood on his cheek, the wild glint in his amber eyes, they all pointed to a truth she could no longer ignore. He wasn't just a man hiding from his past, and the wolf that had saved her wasn't just a wolf. The pieces were falling into place, and Elise's fear was matched only by her need to know. She moved to the table, her fingers trembling as she unfolded the map again. The symbols, spirals, crescents, jagged lines, felt alive, pulsing with a meaning she couldn't decipher but felt in her bones. Bloodhollow stared back at her, a name that carried a weight she didn't understand but couldn't shake. She thought of Rhys's crescent moon tattoo, the way he'd brushed it as if it were a wound. Whatever he was facing out there, it was tied to this place, to the howls, to the legacy he'd hinted at. Elise's chest tightened, not just with fear but with the pull she felt toward him. A connection that had grown stronger with every shared glance, every moment of vulnerability. The door rattled, softer this time, and Elise's grip tightened on the fireplace poker she still held. "Rhys?" she called, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "It's me," came his low, strained reply. "Open the door, Elise." She slid the bolt back, stepping aside as Rhys stumbled in, his face pale, his shirt torn at the shoulder where fresh blood seeped through. His amber eyes met hers, wild and pained, and Elise's breath caught. "You're hurt," she said, dropping the poker and rushing to him. "What happened out there?" Rhys waved her off, but his movements were sluggish, his breath ragged. "It's nothing," he said, leaning against the wall. "Just a scratch." "That's not a scratch," Elise snapped, her worry overriding her caution. She grabbed the first aid kit from the table, her hands shaking as she opened it. "Sit down." Now, Rhys's lips twitched, a faint smile despite the pain in his eyes. "Bossy," he muttered, but he sank onto the couch, his broad frame slumping slightly. Elise knelt beside him, peeling back the torn fabric of his shirt to reveal a deep gash across his shoulder, jagged and raw. Her stomach twisted. It wasn't a branch or a fall. Something had attacked him. "Rhys," she said, her voice low as she cleaned the wound with antiseptic, wincing as he hissed. This wasn't a wolf. Not a normal one. "What's going on?" He didn't answer right away, his eyes fixed on the fire, his jaw tight. Elise worked in silence, bandaging the wound with careful precision, her fingers brushing his skin. His warmth, the steady rise and fall of his chest, sent a shiver through her, a mix of fear and something deeper, something that made her heart ache. When she finished, she sat back on her heels, her eyes searching his. "You told me some truths come with a cost," she said. "I'm ready to pay it. Tell me what's out there. Tell me what you are." Rhys's gaze met hers, and for a moment the cabin seemed to hold its breath. The firelight danced across his face, highlighting the scar on his cheek, the exhaustion in his eyes. "You won't believe me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And if you do, you might wish you didn't." "Try me," Elise said, her voice firm but soft, her hand resting on the couch near his. "I've seen too much to walk away now. That wolf, the howls, this isn't normal. I know it and you know I know it." Rhys exhaled, a sound heavy with resignation. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped as if anchoring himself. "You're right," he said, his voice low, raw. "That wolf you saw, it was me." The words hit like a shockwave, and Elise's breath caught. She stared at him, her mind racing to process what he'd said. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That's impossible, is it?" Rhys's eyes burned into hers, fierce and unyielding. "You saw it, Elise, you felt it. The way it looked at you, the way it protected you. That was me. I couldn't let them hurt you." Elise's heart pounded, her thoughts a chaotic swirl. She wanted to laugh, to call it madness. But the truth was in his eyes, in the way he'd moved, in the tattoo that marked him. "You're a werewolf?" she said, the word feeling absurd on her tongue but undeniable in the weight of the moment. Rhys nodded, his expression guarded but open, like he was bracing for her to run. "That's one word for it. My kind. We're born with it. A bloodline tied to the moon, to the forest. We shift, we protect, we survive. But it's not a gift, it's a curse. One I've been running from my whole life." Elise's mind reeled, images flashing. His amber eyes, the wolf's gaze, the way he'd known the woods like they were part of him. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Why keep it a secret?" "Because it's dangerous," Rhys said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not just for me, but for anyone who gets too close. My family, my pack, they wanted me to lead, to embrace the curse. I refused. I left them, came here to be alone. But the woods, they don't let you go. Elise's chest ached, not just from the revelation, but from the pain in his voice, the weight of a life he hadn't chosen. That thing out there, she said, glancing at the door. It wasn't just a wolf, was it? It's tied to you. Rhys's jaw tightened and he nodded. A rogue, one of my pack, probably sent to drag me back. They don't take kindly to deserters. He paused, his eyes softening as they met hers. I didn't want you caught in this, Elise. I wanted to keep you safe. The sincerity in his words cracked something open in her, and Elise reached out, her hand brushing his. You did, she said, her voice thick. You saved me. Twice now. But I'm not running, Rhys. Not yet. His eyes widened, a flicker of hope breaking through his guarded expression. You should, he said, but his hand turned, his fingers lacing with hers, warm and strong. This world, it's not kind to those who don't belong. Maybe I don't belong anywhere else, Elise said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. The connection between them, fragile but undeniable, pulsed in the space where their hands met. Before Rhys could respond, a low growl rumbled outside, closer than before, followed by the crunch of footsteps in the snow. His head snapped toward the window, his body tensing, his eyes blazing with that wild, predatory glint. Stay here, he said, pulling his hand away and standing. No matter what you hear, don't come out. Rhys, Elise started, but he was already at the door, his movements swift and silent. He glanced back, his eyes holding hers for a fleeting moment, a mix of fear and determination. I'll come back, he said. And then he was gone, the door slamming shut behind him. Elise stared at the door, her heart pounding. The truth of what he was, a shifter, a werewolf, changed everything, but it didn't break the pull she felt toward him. If anything, it made it stronger. But the growls outside, the danger circling closer, told her this was only the beginning. Whatever was out there, it wanted Rhys, and now it knew she was here too. Chapter 7. Betrayal or Sacrifice. Elise Harper's heart hammered against her ribs as she stood alone in Rhys's cabin, the echo of the door slamming behind him still ringing in her ears. The growls outside, low and menacing, seemed to vibrate through the walls, a reminder of the danger lurking in the Blackwood Forest. Rhys's confession, that he was the wolf, a shifter bound by a cursed bloodline, had turned her world upside down, but it hadn't broken the fragile thread tying her to him. If anything, it tightened it, weaving their shared pain into something deeper, something she couldn't name but felt in every glance, every touch. Yet the danger outside, the rogue wolf from his pack, threatened to unravel it all. Elise clutched the edge of the table, her eyes darting to the map marked Blood Hollow, its cryptic symbols a taunting puzzle she couldn't solve. The fire crackled, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold fear creeping through her. Rhys's words, "I'll come back," hung in the air, a promise she wanted to believe but couldn't fully trust. Not because she doubted his sincerity, but because the weight of his secret, the legacy he'd fled, felt like a storm ready to swallow them both. She moved to the window, peering into the darkness, but the forest gave nothing away, only shadows and the faint crunch of snow under unseen paws. Her fingers brushed the bandage on her arm, a reminder of his care, and her chest ached with a mix of fear for him and a need to understand the world she'd stumbled into. A sharp yelp cut through the night, followed by a guttural snarl that made Elise flinch. The sounds were close, too close, and her mind flashed to Rhys, his torn coat, the blood on his cheek, the way he'd faced the danger without hesitation. She wanted to run after him, to demand he let her help, but his warning to stay put held her back. Instead, she turned to the map, her fingers tracing the red ink of Blood Hollow. Whatever this place was, it was tied to Rhys's past, to the pack he'd abandoned, to the rogue now hunting him. Elise's resolve hardened. She couldn't just wait here, helpless, while he faced it alone. The door burst open, and Elise spun, her heart leaping into her throat. Rhys stumbled in, his face pale, his shirt soaked with blood from the gash on his shoulder. His amber eyes were wild, pained, but they softened when they found hers. "Elise," he rasped, leaning heavily against the doorframe. "Lock it, now!" She rushed to him, sliding the bolt into place before helping him to the couch. What happened? She demanded, her voice shaking as she grabbed the first aid kit. You're bleeding again. Rhys winced as he sat, his breath ragged. It's not as bad as it looks, he said, but his voice was weak, and the fresh blood seeping through his shirt told a different story. The rogue. It's gone. For now. Elise knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she cut away the torn fabric to reveal the reopened wound, now joined by a new gash across his chest. This isn't not bad, Rhys, she said, her voice sharp with worry. What did this? And don't lie to me. He met her gaze, his eyes heavy with exhaustion and something else. Guilt. I told you, he said quietly. A rogue from my pack. They don't take kindly to those who walk away. Elise's hands stilled, the antiseptic wipe hovering over his wound. Your pack, she repeated, her voice low. They're after you because you left? Why? What do they want? Rhys's jaw tightened and he looked away, his fingers clenching into fists. They want me back, he said, his voice barely audible. To lead, to be the alpha they think I'm supposed to be. But I can't, Elise. I won't. The word alpha sent a chill through her, conjuring images of the wolf that had saved her, its power and grace undeniable. Alpha, she echoed, her mind racing. You mean, you're supposed to be their leader? He nodded, his expression grim. It's in my blood. My family's ruled the pack for generations. But their way, control, dominance, blood, it's not who I am. I left to escape it, to live free. But they don't let go that easily. Elise resumed cleaning his wounds, her touch gentle but her mind spinning. So they sent that rogue to drag you back? She asked. Or to kill you? Rhys's silence was answer enough. She bandaged his chest, her fingers brushing his skin, and the contact sent a jolt through her. A mix of fear, anger, and something deeper. Something that made her want to protect him as fiercely as he'd protected her. Why didn't you tell me this before? She asked, her voice soft but edged with hurt. You let me think you were just hiding, not running from a pack of wolves who want you dead. His hand caught hers, his grip warm and firm, and Elise's breath hitched. I wanted to keep you out of it, he said, his eyes searching hers. You're already in too deep, Elise. Knowing this, it makes you a target. I thought if I kept you in the dark, you'd be safe. The rawness in his voice cracked her defenses, and Elise felt tears prick her eyes. You don't get to decide that for me, she said, her voice trembling. I'm not some fragile thing you need to protect. I've been through hell, Rhys. I can handle this. His thumb brushed her knuckles, a small gesture that sent warmth flooding through her. I know you can, he said, his voice low, almost reverent. That's what scares me. You're not running even when you should, even when I'm telling you to. Elise held his gaze, the air between them electric. Maybe I'm done running, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe I'm here because I'm supposed to be. Rhys's eyes widened, a flicker of hope breaking through his guarded expression. For a moment they were still, their hands intertwined, the world outside fading away. Elise felt the pull between them, stronger now, like a force she couldn't fight. But before she could speak, a low growl rumbled outside, followed by the crunch of snow, multiple footsteps. Deliberate and close. Rhys's head snapped toward the window, his body tensing, his eyes blazing with that predatory glint. They're back, he said, his voice low and urgent. He stood, wincing as he moved, and grabbed a knife from the table. Elise, stay behind me. Who's back? She demanded, her heart racing as she stood, grabbing the fireplace poker. The rogue? Rhys's expression was grim, his eyes never leaving the window. Not just the rogue, the pack. They've found me. The words sent a chill through her, and Elise's grip tightened on the poker. The growls grew louder, circling the cabin, and she realized the danger wasn't just to Rhys, it was to her, too. His secret was out, and now she was part of it. But as she stood beside him, their shoulders brushing, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't leaving him to face this alone. Chapter 8. Emotional Breakthrough. Elise. Harper's pulse thundered in her ears as she stood beside Rhys in the dim cabin, the fireplace poker gripped tightly in her hands. The growls outside circled closer, a chorus of menace that vibrated through the walls, each sound tightening the knot of fear in her chest. The revelation of Rhys's true nature, a werewolf, an alpha fleeing his pack, still spun in her mind. But it was his raw confession, his need to protect her, that anchored her to his side. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, their shoulders brushing as they faced the door, united against the unseen threat. The pack was here, and Elise knew this moment would change everything. Rhys's amber eyes glowed in the firelight, his body taut, the knife in his hand steady despite the blood seeping through his bandaged wounds. "Stay behind me, Elise," he said, his voice low and commanding, but there was a tremor in it, a fear not for himself, but for her. "No matter what happens, don't let them see you." "Who are they?" Elise whispered, her voice steady despite the chaos in her heart. "Your pack, what do they want?" Rhys's jaw clenched, his gaze fixed on the door. "Me," he said simply. "They want their alpha back. Or they want me dead." His eyes flicked to hers, and she saw a storm of emotions, guilt, resolve, and something softer, something that made her breath catch. "I'm sorry you're caught in this, Elise. I never meant for—" "Stop." She cut him off, her voice firm. "You saved me, Rhys. I'm here because I chose to be. Don't apologize for that." His eyes widened, a flicker of surprise breaking through his guarded expression, and for a moment, the growls outside faded, the world narrowing to just the two of them. Elise felt the pull between them, stronger now, a thread woven from shared pain and unspoken trust. But before she could say more, the door shuddered under a heavy blow, wood splintering at the edges. Rhys moved in front of her, his body a shield, his knife raised. "Get to the back," he growled, but Elise didn't budge. She tightened her grip on the poker, her heart pounding but her resolve unwavering. She wasn't running, not from this, not from him. The door burst open, and 3 figures stormed in, their eyes glinting with the same unnatural amber as Rhys's. 2 men and a woman, all lean and predatory, their movements fluid, almost inhuman. The woman, her dark hair braided tightly, stepped forward, her gaze locking onto Rhys. "You can't run forever, Alpha," she said, her voice cold, laced with venom. "The pack needs you," Bloodhollow calls. "I'm not your Alpha," Rhys snarled, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver through Elise. "I left that life." "You know why?" The woman's lips curled into a sneer. "Because you're weak? Because you think you can escape what you are?" Her eyes flicked to Elise, narrowing. "And now you've dragged a human into this." "She reeks of your scent, Rhys. What's she to you?" Elise's heart skipped, the words "your scent" echoing in her mind. She glanced at Rhys, but his focus remained on the intruders, his body coiled like a spring. "She's nothing to you," he said, his voice deadly calm. "Leave her out of this, Mara." Mara laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Nothing? She's standing here with a poker, ready to fight for you." "That's not nothing." She took a step closer, her eyes gleaming. "The pack doesn't tolerate weakness, Rhys. You know the rules. If you won't come back, we'll take you down, and her with you." Elise's grip tightened, fear and anger warring within her. She didn't understand the full weight of their words, but she felt the threat, the danger radiating from these shifters. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, stepping forward despite Rhys's warning glance. "You want him? You'll have to go through me." Mara's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise, but before she could respond, a deafening roar shook the cabin. Rhys lunged, his knife flashing, but the 2 men moved faster, tackling him to the floor. Elise screamed, raising the poker, but Mara was on her in an instant, pinning her against the wall with a strength that belied her lean frame. "Stay out of this, human," Mara hissed, her breath hot against Elise's face. Elise struggled, her heart racing, but Mara's grip was iron. Through the chaos, she saw Rhys fighting, his movements a blur of power and grace, but he was outnumbered, his wounds slowing him down. Blood spattered the floor, and Elise's fear turned to desperation. "Rhys!" she shouted, her voice breaking. His head snapped toward her, and in that moment something shifted. His eyes blazed, not just with anger but with something deeper, a fierce, protective instinct that seemed to ignite the air. With a roar that was more beast than man, he threw one of the men off, his strength surging. He tackled the other, pinning him to the ground, his knife at the man's throat. Enough, Rhys bellowed, his voice echoing with authority. Leave or I end this now. Mara's grip on Elise loosened, her eyes wide with shock. You'd kill your own pack? She whispered, stepping back. For her? Rhys's gaze flicked to Elise, and the raw emotion there, fear, determination, something that looked like love, stole her breath. Go, he said to Mara, his voice low, final. Tell them I'm done. No more blood. Mara hesitated, her eyes darting between Rhys and Elise, then nodded curtly. This isn't over, she said, gesturing to the others. They retreated, slipping into the night, their growls fading into the forest. Rhys collapsed against the wall, his breath ragged, blood seeping from his wounds. Elise rushed to him, dropping the poker and kneeling beside him. You're hurt, she said, her voice trembling as she reached for the first aid kit. Why did you do that? You could have... I couldn't let them hurt you. He cut her off, his voice rough but soft, his hand catching hers. Elise, I've been running from them my whole life, but you're the first thing that's made me want to fight. Her throat tightened, tears prickling her eyes. Rhys, she whispered, her hand tightening around his. I'm not worth that. You are, he said, his voice fierce, his eyes locking onto hers. You're worth everything. The air between them crackled, the weight of his words sinking into her. Elise felt the pull between them, stronger than ever, a bond forged in blood and trust. She leaned closer, her forehead resting against his, their breaths mingling. I'm not running, she said, her voice steady despite the tears. Not from you. Rhys's hand cupped her cheek, his touch gentle despite the blood and pain. For a moment, they were still, the world outside forgotten, but a distant howl shattered the silence. A reminder that the pack wasn't gone for good. Rhys's body tensed, his eyes darkening. They'll come back, he said, his voice low. And next time they won't leave without a fight. Elise nodded, her resolve hardening. Then we face them together, she said, her hand still in his. But you need to tell me everything, Rhys. No more secrets. He nodded, a promise in his eyes. But the howl grew louder, closer, and Elise knew their time for truths was running out. The pack was coming, and with them, a reckoning that would test everything they'd built. Chapter 9. Love Revealed. The cabin's fire cast flickering shadows across Elise Harper's face as she knelt beside Rhys, her hand still clasped in his, their foreheads nearly touching in the aftermath of the pack's attack. The air was thick with the scent of blood and pine, the silence heavy with the weight of their shared moment, his fierce declaration, her resolve to stand with him. The distant howl that broke the quiet was a stark reminder that the danger wasn't over, that the pack lurking in Blackwood Forest was closing in. Yet, in this fleeting moment, Elise felt something stronger than fear, a bond with Rhys that burned brighter than the fire, deeper than the secrets he carried as a shifter, an alpha running from his past. Rhys's hand trembled slightly against her cheek, his amber eyes searching hers with a mix of awe and fear. You shouldn't be here, he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. This fight, it's mine, Elise, not yours. She shook her head, her fingers tightening around his. It's ours now, she said, her voice steady despite the tears stinging her eyes. You saved me, Rhys. You told me I'm worth everything. Well, you're worth it to me, too. The words spilled out, raw and unguarded, and Elise felt her heart lay bare. She'd spent so long running, from her father's death, from Caleb's betrayal, from herself. But with Rhys, she wanted to stay, to fight, even if it meant facing a world she barely understood. His breath hitched, and for a moment he looked like he might pull away, his instincts warring with the vulnerability in his gaze. Elise, he said, his voice breaking. You don't know what you're saying. My world, it's blood and curses, pack laws that don't bend. I'm not just a man. I'm a monster. You're not a monster, she said fiercely, her hand moving to his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath her palm. You're the one who protected me when no one else did. You're the one who's bleeding for me right now. If that's what a monster is, then I'll take it over anyone else. Rhys's eyes softened, a storm of emotions swirling within them. grief, longing, and something that looked like hope. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling in the firelight. "I've been alone for so long," he whispered, his voice raw. "Running, hiding, keeping everyone at arm's length. But you make me want to stop, to fight for something real." Elise's throat tightened, her heart swelling with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "Then fight for it," she said, her voice barely audible. "Fight for us." The words hung between them, a confession that felt like a vow. Rhys's hand slid to the back of her neck, his touch gentle but possessive, and for a moment, Elise thought he might kiss her. The pull between them was electric, a force she couldn't resist, and she didn't want to. But before their lips could meet, a sharp howl, closer, more insistent, shattered the moment. Rhys's body tensed, his eyes blazing with that wild, predatory glint. "They're coming," he said, pulling back but keeping her hand in his. "Elise, I need you to listen. If things go wrong, you run. Promise me." "No," she said, standing with him, her resolve unwavering. "I'm not leaving you. You said it yourself, they want you back or dead. I'm not letting them have either." Rhys's lips curved into a bittersweet smile, a mix of pride and fear. "Stubborn," he muttered. But there was no heat in it, only a warmth that made her heart ache. He grabbed the knife from the table, his movements swift despite the blood seeping through his bandages. "Stay close, then. But don't do anything reckless." Elise nodded, picking up the fireplace poker, her hand steady despite the fear gnawing at her. The growls outside grew louder, a chorus of menace that circled the cabin like a noose tightening. Rhys moved to the window, peering into the darkness, his body coiled like a predator ready to strike. "They're testing us," he said, his voice low. "Trying to draw me out." "Who are they, Rhys?" Elise asked, her voice steady but urgent. "You said Mara and the others were your pack, but what do they really want? Why now?" He turned to her, his expression grim. "The pack follows old laws," he said. "Blood laws. An alpha doesn't just walk away. It's a betrayal of the bloodline, of the moon that binds us. They've been hunting me since I left, but I thought I'd covered my tracks, until you showed up." His eyes softened, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. "Your scent. It's marked by me now. They know you're important to me." Elise's heart skipped, the words "important to me" echoing in her mind. "Marked?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What does that mean?" Rhys hesitated, his jaw tightening. "It's not something I can explain quickly," he said. "But it's why they're here. They think you're a weakness, a way to force me back, or to break me." The weight of his words settled over her, and Elise felt a surge of anger. Not at him, but at the pack, at the world that would punish him for wanting freedom. "They're wrong," she said, stepping closer, her hand brushing his arm. "You're not weak, Rhys, and neither am I." His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, the growls outside faded, the world narrowing to just them. "I don't deserve you," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "but I'll fight like hell to keep you safe." Before Elise could respond, the window shattered, glass spraying across the floor as a massive wolf lunged into the cabin. Its fur was dark, its eyes glowing with malice, and it snarled as it landed, its gaze fixed on Rhys. Elise screamed, raising the poker, but Rhys was faster, tackling the wolf with a roar that was more beast than man. They crashed into the table, maps and books scattering, and Elise's heart lurched as she saw the blood on Rhys's chest, his wounds reopening. "Stay back," he shouted, grappling with the wolf, his knife flashing. But another growl sounded at the door, and Elise realized they were surrounded. She swung the poker, her fear giving way to a fierce determination to protect Rhys, to protect whatever this was between them. The wolf at the door broke through, and Elise acted on instinct, swinging the poker with all her strength. It connected with a sickening thud, and the wolf yelped, retreating. Rhys pinned the first wolf, his knife at its throat, but he didn't strike. "Go!" he growled, his voice raw with authority. "Tell them I'm done running. But I'm not coming back." The wolf snarled but backed away, limping toward the broken window. The second followed, and the cabin fell silent, save for Rhys's ragged breathing. He collapsed to his knees, blood dripping onto the floor, and Elise rushed to him, her hands trembling as she helped him to the couch. "You're okay," she said, her voice breaking as she grabbed the first aid kit. "You're going to be okay." Rhys caught her wrist, his touch gentle despite his pain. "Elise," he said, his eyes burning into hers. "I love you." The words stole her breath, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered, the confession spilling out like a dam breaking. "I don't know how, but I do." He pulled her close, his lips brushing her forehead, and for a moment, they held each other, the world outside forgotten. But the howls returned, closer now, and Elise knew the pack wasn't done. Their love was real, but it was also a beacon, drawing danger closer. And whatever came next, they'd face it together, or not at all. Chapter 10. Final Challenge. The cabin was a battlefield of broken glass and scattered papers, the firelight casting jagged shadows across the wreckage as Elise Harper knelt beside Rhys, her hands trembling as she pressed a cloth to his bleeding chest. His confession, "I love you," still echoed in her heart, a beacon of warmth amidst the chaos of the pack's attack. Her own words, "I love you too," had slipped out like a truth she'd known all along, binding them in a way that felt fated, inevitable. But the howls outside, growing louder and more insistent, were a stark reminder that their love was a spark in a storm, one that the pack, driven by ancient blood laws, was determined to extinguish. Elise's resolve hardened as she met Rhys's amber eyes, their glow dimmed by pain, but fierce with determination. "Hold still," she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. The gashes on his chest were deep, the blood soaking through the bandage she'd hastily applied. The pack's assault had been brutal, and though Rhys had driven them off, the cost was written in his wounds. "You need a doctor, Rhys. This is bad." "No doctors," he rasped, his hand catching hers, his grip warm and firm despite his weakness. "Not for me. I heal fast. Part of the curse." His lips twitched, a faint attempt at a smile, but his eyes were serious, searching hers. "You shouldn't have stayed, Elise. This isn't your fight." She shook her head, her throat tight with emotion. "It's ours," she said, her voice fierce. "You're not alone anymore, Rhys. Neither am I." The words felt like a vow, sealing the bond that had grown between them, forged in shared pain, trust, and now love. She leaned closer, her hand resting on his cheek, feeling the rough stubble and the warmth of his skin. "We face this together." Rhys's eyes softened, a mix of awe and fear flickering within them. "You're braver than I am," he murmured, his thumb brushing her wrist. "But they're not done. Myra, she won't stop. The pack follows her now, and they'll come for us both." Elise's heart lurched at the mention of Mara, the shifter whose cold voice and predatory gaze had promised bloodshed. "Then we need a plan," she said, glancing at the shattered window, the cold air seeping in. "You said Bloodhollow is tied to your pack. What is it? Can we use it against them?" Rhys's expression darkened, his hand tightening around hers. "Bloodhollow's sacred to the pack," he said, his voice low, heavy with memory. "It's where the bloodline's power is strongest, where the moon's pull binds us. The pack believes it's where an alpha proves their worth, or dies trying. If they're hunting me, that's where they'll go." Elise's mind raced, the map's red ink flashing in her memory. "Then we go there first," she said, her voice firm. "We face them on our terms, not theirs." Rhys's eyes widened, a mix of pride and fear crossing his face. "It's dangerous, Elise, Bloodhollow. It changes you. The moon's power, the pack's laws. It's not a place for humans." "I'm not just a human anymore," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "Not to them and not to you. You said I'm marked by your scent. That means I'm in this, Rhys, whether you like it or not." He stared at her, his gaze intense, and for a moment, the howls outside faded, the world narrowing to just them. "You're impossible," he said, a faint smile breaking through his pain. "And I love you for it." The words sent a warmth through her, but before she could respond, A low growl rumbled outside, followed by the crunch of multiple footsteps in the snow. Rhys tensed, his body shifting despite his wounds, his eyes blazing with that predatory glint. "They're here," he said, standing with a wince, grabbing the knife from the floor. "Stay behind me, Elise. If it comes to it, you run." "No," she said, grabbing the fireplace poker and standing beside him. "Together, remember?" Before Rhys could argue, the door splintered inward, and Mara stormed in, flanked by 4 shifters, their eyes glowing amber in the firelight. Their presence filled the cabin, a wall of menace and power. Mara's braid was loose now, her face streaked with dirt, her lips curled in a sneer. "You're out of time, Rhys," she said, her voice cold. "The pack claims you, or it claims your blood." Rhys stepped forward, his knife raised, his body shielding Elise. "I'm not yours to claim," he growled, his voice carrying an authority that made the air hum. "I left the pack. I left Blood Hollow. This ends now." Mara laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "You think you can walk away from your blood? From the moon?" Her eyes flicked to Elise, narrowing. "And you think this human can save you? She's nothing, Rhys. A weakness." Elise's anger flared, and she stepped forward, her poker raised. "I'm not nothing," she said, her voice steady. "And he's not alone." Mara's sneer faltered, but before she could respond, Rhys lunged, his knife flashing. The shifters moved in a blur, and the cabin erupted into chaos. Snarls, crashes, the clash of metal and flesh. Elise swung her poker, catching one shifter in the shoulder, but another tackled her, pinning her to the floor. She struggled, her heart pounding, but Rhys's roar cut through the fray. He threw off his attacker, his strength surging despite his wounds, and pulled Elise free, his arm around her waist. "We need to get to Blood Hollow," he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. "It's our only chance." Elise nodded, her heart racing as they fought their way to the door, Rhys's knife and her poker keeping the shifters at bay. They stumbled into the snow, the cold biting at their skin, the howls of the pack echoing behind them. Rhys led the way, his steps sure despite his injuries, guiding them through the dense forest toward a place Elise could only imagine. A place of power, of blood, of destiny. As they ran, Elise felt the weight of their bond, the love they'd confessed, driving her forward. But the howls grew closer, and she knew the pack wouldn't stop. Blood Hollow was their last stand, a place where Rhys would have to face his past, and where Elise would have to prove she belonged in his world. The moon hung low, its light filtering through the trees, and Elise felt its pull, as if it were calling to her, too. They reached a clearing, the air thick with an unnatural energy, and Rhys stopped, his hand tightening around hers. "This is it," he said, his voice low, his eyes searching hers. "Blood Hollow. Whatever happens, Elise, I'm with you." She squeezed his hand, her heart steady despite the fear. "And I'm with you," she said, ready to face whatever the night would bring.